So now we are going to have a panel discussion where we will be able to understand more how we could do it. How we could, really make business in Brazil. I would like to invite it here Ron Dershford from Alon Global. Ron has guided global business through critical strategic analysis and senior management support to deliver sustained growth, profitability, and value. With nearly 4 decades of international expertise, Ron currently helps senior management plan and execute productive solutions, staying ahead of the many challenges associated with growth. His professional career has focused on consumer products, education, technology, and more recently, e-commerce. Ron's expertise and multicultural acumen enables him to work seamlessly with companies and brands based in the US, Brazil, and Europe. Throughout the course of his career, Ron's focus has been to propose and execute global growth strategies as an entrepreneur, investor, C-suite executive, board member, or chair. Working along funding partners, Ron has also co-invested while preparing companies and brands for strategic investment solutions. Ron has held leadership roles across both public and private entities, spearheading intellectual property development, sourcing, and distribution on a global scale. Specifically, Ron has built distribution solutions for global brands, including the high successful implementation of Converse All Stars in Brazil and Argentina, which was acquired by Nike. At present, his professional focus is generated towards supporting business in the careful planning and execution of global growth strategies designed to amplify value for their consumers, employees, and shareholders alike. Please, Ron. I would like also to introduce another Ron, that is Ron Slatin, has over 20 years of cross-border business experience between US and Brazil markets. Ron is the founder of and CEO of Brazil-US Capital, which works with clients to help expand their international business operations in the areas of business development strategies, equity fundraisers, and mergers and acquisitions. Ron is a registered representative of Finally Securities. Ron is a former Georgia State Senator. He served 2 terms in Georgia legislature, my accent, sorry, representing the city of Atlanta. After politics, Ron moved to São Paulo to work for one of the largest cellular phone distributors in the world, and then served as international sales manager of Mandala International, which offers Anvisa registration in Brazil for pharma, biotech, medical equipment, food supplement, and agriculture industry. Ron currently serves on the board of the Brazilian Chamber of Commerce of the Southeast. Ron. And also I would like to invite Michael Luiz, that he is head of operations at Drummond Advisors, responsible for the Brazil operations. He has bachelor in accounting and the post-graduation also in Brazil. He has a career to support small, medium, and large companies in auditing and accounting for more than 15 years. Also worked as a auditor and is now in leadership position with other accountants. So he's also the head of operations in Brazil. All right. So to start our panel, I would like just to pass the microphone, and would like which one of you to talk a little bit about your business in Brazil and here in the US.
Thank you. I don't know where to start. I've been involved with Brazil for about 50 years of my life. And today I spend half my time in Brazil, half here. And I'm also married for 50 years to a Brazilian woman who's also American. My 3 kids were born in Brazil, and today one of them is a doctor here and 2 in Brazil. And I've been Brazil's been very good for me. I consider myself bicultural. I only speak Portuguese with my wife, never spoke English with her because we met in Brazil. And so I think that that's given me an advantage to be able to talk in Brazil as a Brazilian businessman with knowledge of the US, and talk in the US and in Europe as an American businessman with knowledge of Brazil. My career, the latter part of my career, has been focused on building global brand distribution around the world, really focused on IP. And with regard to Brazil, I would say to you the following: the dynamics of growth are the same all over the world. You want to evaluate your risk reward. You want to build market share. You want to be profitable. You want to build a model that's sustainable over time. The difference is the nuance of each country. In Europe and in the United States, it's a more knowledgeable roadmap. It's very similar, the roadmap, whether it's regarding product, distribution channels, legal structures. In Brazil, it's like an island. It's its own ecosystem. And the key to success, in my opinion, is being able to recognize that and navigate it as a Brazilian, not as an American or European that wants to do business in Brazil. And I tell people that I work with that the road to Brazil, the investment road, is littered with corporate skeletons that didn't understand that. And there's many of them, and many big ones, by the way. People like Subway went to Brazil, went bankrupt the first 2 times. Bankrupt. They had to go back and rethink. Even Nike went bankrupt in Brazil the first time, and they had to go back and recalibrate. And so what I find the most important part of all that is building partnerships with local operators that can handhold you through the process. Not too many Americans speak Portuguese, and it's essential to have people in the country that can guide you and that you can set up a business model that works for the local economy. I'll give you just an example for us, how we lost a ton of money before we made some money. We thought we could build a business in Brazil importing product. We thought we did it in the US, we did it in Europe. Why couldn't we do it in Brazil? And we were very successful right out of the box, importing product. But then all of a sudden, there was a devaluation and there was a change in the duty. So our entire business model got turned upside down. Many companies would have walked away, and many have, and lost money. We decided not to. We decided to find partners, build a local business, bringing the technology, and Brazilians are really good at learning and building local solutions. And by doing that, we were able to build in 4 years a new business that reached $150 million wholesale, which is about 300 million retail, which Nike then came in and took. They bought, which they were smart to do. But I tell you that because there's always challenges, but you got to be prepared for them in Brazil and find local solutions. You can't sustain scaling in Brazil with imported solutions, in my opinion. Has to be local. That's probably the greatest thing that I've learned is that you got to be able to go talk to the buyers about the soccer game over the weekend with Atletico and Cruzeiro. You can't go talk about the Super Bowl. You know, it's little things like that that make the difference. And if you can find partners that share your values, you're going to be that much more successful. And I think that's essential. I don't know if that's what you wanted.
Thanks, Ron. No, that's awesome. Michael, could you talk about what do you do and how do you help companies in Brazil?
Well, today I'm here to talk with you guys about a shareholder, an important shareholder of all the companies around the world, that is the government, local government. Well, as a team here in Drummond, we help many different companies in the United States, in Brazil, to develop business, and we help them with the back office services. So one important thing related the Brazilian market is that I'm not sure if it's the most developed or advanced in IT solutions for the tax environment, but probably is the one of the most developed countries in the world when we talk about connections and technology in the tax area. For instance, all the purchases that you made as an individual or as a company are controlled electronically by the government. So all the invoices are issued for a restaurant or for a company that are buying some equipment or things like that. Everything is electronically, and the government knows everything that is happening in Brazil when you have a purchase or a sale. So this is quite important. This could be good for you if you are doing the correct thing, but could be worse if you don't know what you are doing in Brazil. So this is very important to know as an investor, as a foreign investor, that you need to understand the tax system in Brazil. You need to understand how complicated it is, but how easy it is to do when you have, of course, properly partners, as was mentioned before. You need to have good partners to develop this business in Brazil, because everything is electronic in Brazil. Just for share one experience with you guys. I came to the US in the final tax season here, which was in this month? Is that right? October 15 is the final tax season here in the US. And I was surprised that when I see that here we need to send to the government some tax returns in paper. We need to print everything and deliver by the mail for the IRS here in the US. In Brazil, since 2014, we do everything electronically. We don't need to file in paper. We don't need to print anything, because the government has a huge system to deliver the financial information. So this is very interesting to know as a foreign investor in Brazil. You need to navigate in this situation, and this situation is related for companies and for individuals. For you to have an idea, as an individual, I don't prepare my own tax return, because the government already have the information of everything that I received during the year, and then they doing a pre-file of my tax return, and then I can go through and just make some adjustments, because the company send information to the government, which the information that I received during the year, and then I just need to confirm that amount. So because of that, the Brazilian market is very interesting to know about that, and the Brazilian market has a great opportunity if you are doing the correct thing, if you know how to navigate in this market. Another important thing related investment in Brazil, considering American companies, is that we have a tax efficiency between both companies during the taxation in Brazil and the US, because many American companies are doing business in Brazil and they don't know about that. But we can take tax credits, foreign tax credits, about the income tax paid in Brazil to reduce the taxes here in the US. So this is a very good thing. And if you are doing the properly elections, of course, here in the US, you can have this tax efficiency. And of course, right now we are here. We're having a very interesting scenario in the taxation in Brazil, which is the tax reform that you spoke it before. This is a very good thing in Brazil because it will simplify how we collect taxes in Brazil and how we can send information to the government, because 5 different types of taxes will be consolidating just 2 types of taxes. So this is very good. It will be a very it will be very good to foreign companies in Brazil, because they don't need to understand more 5 different legislations, and just they need to understand 2 different legislations, which will be the same thing basically for now. And we started that by 2026. But we have a good opportunity for American companies doing business in Brazil. And then I will reinforce this idea. It's very important to know how to have tax efficiency in Brazil, in the United States. This is very important to start a business in Brazil. So it's very good to be here with you guys to discuss more about the taxation system in Brazil. And I'll be very happy to share my knowledge and my experience with you guys. Thank you very much.
Ron, your turn. Yes. No, you just get going.
Good. You get 2 Rons for the price of 1. So glad to be here today. So my company, I help Brazil companies come to the U.S. and U.S. companies go to Brazil. I've been doing it for a cross-border work for 20 years. And I just want to talk about some overall trends that I'm seeing going on. So like Rodrigo, I'm very optimistic of what's going on this year, next year. I've never seen more opportunities cross-border than what we have going on now. It used to be in the U.S. that when I call in a company about coming to Brazil, they go, well, we're thinking about going to Europe, and then we want to go to Asia, and then we're going to look at Latin America. But it's different now. It's different now that American companies are looking at going to South America, Latin America first now, because of what's going on in Europe, what's going on in China with lockdown during pandemic. Now the American companies are seeing the opportunity in South America. And with Brazil being 65% of the economy of South America, it makes sense to operate in Brazil and then and trade with the other South American countries. The other thing I've seen, Ambassador pointed out, in Brazilian businesses are thinking more international now. Everybody's trading in other countries in South America. They're looking at Mexico. They're coming to the U.S. And it's interesting because there's a lot of opportunities. These companies are very successful in Brazil. They have revenue, but it's very expensive for Brazil companies to come to the U.S. because of the exchange rate, and everything's more expensive in the U.S. So they're looking at raising capital through selling 5, 10, 15% equity in their company, gives them money to operate in the U.S. and expand internationally elsewhere in the world. Also, what's happening is we have a whole innovation startup ecosystem in Brazil that is starting to get a lot of traction, sort of based on the U.S. model, where if a researcher in the university has successful research, instead of just publishing a paper, now they're thinking about how to commercialize it. And we have that incubators all through Brazil. We're having more commercialization of this fantastic research that's going on in pharma, biotech, ag tech. And so there's huge opportunities for private equity, venture capitalists, and companies to make strategic investments into these startup innovative companies into Brazil. So that's another area that I'm working in that I've seen a lot of growth and success. So all this is making me very optimistic. And also say that, the work that Apex does with trade shows, international trade shows, is very important, supporting Brazil businesses make international contacts. You see at the Pharma, Medica, at IPPE here in Atlanta. And when you go to these trade shows, you see that Brazil has one of the biggest booths at any of these shows. And it shows how strong these companies are. And that really helps the Brazil companies expand international and make international contacts. And so that's another area that's helping to expand the Brazil businesses. And then when we come back around, I'll talk more about specifics about doing business in Brazil. But overall, I'm very optimistic what's going on, and glad to be here to talk about it.
Thank you, Ron. Yes, I'm also a Brazilian optimist, right? I believe Brazil has great opportunities that we need to learn how to navigate, as I learned how to navigate doing business here in the US in the past 10 years, supporting international companies coming to the US, mainly in Brazil, to succeed here. So, Ron, what qualities do you look for in a local partner or collaborator? You spoke that is really important to find someone in Brazil that helps you to navigate. So, what is the qualities you're looking for?
So in my case, we tend to want to work with producers or maybe distributors, but producers that own market share, producers that understand, that have a history of delivering the right product at the right price into the various distribution channels, whether it's wholesale or e-business, whichever channel. So we focus on that. And then I would say track record is important for us. You can see a person's history, what they do. You see how they act, how they treat their market, their consumers, their employees. And you want to try to find people where you can align values with, because it's going to avoid some of the problems going forward. And like any company, any country, there's always people in the market that want to grow very quick and make a lot of money. But I have been focused more on sustainability over time. And that comes with really aligning values. And it does not happen overnight. I can tell you that. I think the ambassador said today about patience. Somebody said patience today. It is so essential to be patient and to not overpromise and underdeliver. You just can't. It'll be very difficult to sustain growth. And so there's a lot of people that want to do things, but you need to find a pathway where you can evaluate it over time, a year, 2 years, 3, before you take it and make major investments for scale. Because things are not always the way you envisage them. In Brazil, it's very dynamic. So a good partner.
Yes. Well, created this relationship and trust, right? In anywhere. So one thing that is really important in this, I believe, the main difference sometimes we see between here in the US is the labor laws, right? Is the relationship about employees. That's what I do every day with my clients, trying to educate them how to lead and to manage and to comply, right, here in the US, different from Brazil in our mindset. And talking about this, Michael, what is the most important issues regarding labor obligations in Brazil?
Yeah, this is a really good point to talk about, because one of the most challenging things for American companies in Brazil probably will be understand how the things work in the labor area, because we have a lot of protections with the legislation for the employees. And to have success in this process, you must be compliant with all these requirements. Just for you to have an idea, and I believe we can start it by this way here. Think about it, about the profile of the employee that you want to have in Brazil. It will be a part-time employee or it will be a full-time employee. This is the first thing that you have to have in mind, because if you have a full-time employee, it needs to be registered as a CLT employee, which means the acronym to the formal employees in Brazil. So under the CLT labor law, you have a lot of things that a company needs to know. For instance, in Brazil, we have 30 days of paid vacation that a company needs to give to the employee. 13th salary is an extra payment by the end of the year that the company must be aware about that. And many of the other different things related the relationship between the company and the employee. And we have a strong regulation by the unions in Brazil. So this is very important to know. Each kind of activity in Brazil have a specific type of union, and the company needs to understand how are the requirements for this union. For instance, in a specific union, you must have some minimum wage for start contracting some employees in Brazil. You have other benefits that is necessary. So you just need to be aware of these main things: the union, how is the relationship between the employee and the company. And of course, we can have contractors in Brazil, as we do in the US. But it needs to be the company needs to be very careful in this situation, because the contractor can't be a full-time employee, or it could be a full-time employee, but you have a tax labor liability in this situation, because since the contractor doesn't have all these benefits that CLT employee has, probably if the things went wrong in the future, the company can have a lawsuit. So this is very important to know. You may have a contractor, but you need to have this relationship the agreement between the companies must be very clear, and there are some things that you can do to avoid this lawsuit in the future. For instance, the contractor does not have he can't have a fixed period of time to work for the company. For instance, this is one important thing. He needs to be independent to provide services for another companies. And then when you have this kind of situations, you probably will avoid if you have a lawsuit in the future. And of course, this is very important to know. And all the tax obligations regarding payroll are electronically. As I mentioned before, it's one important area in Brazil. Everything is electronically. So all the payroll that the company's process during the month is delivered automatically to the government, and the Brazilian government already know how much employees you have, how was the wages paid, which were the social security taxes involved in the payroll. So everything the Brazilian governments already know electronically in a monthly basis. This is very accurate system. It's called e-social in Brazil, e-social in Brazil. So this is one of the most important things that I think you have to have in mind before you started to hire employees in Brazil. Look at if the employee will be a full-time or a part-time, and then you go through to have the relationship between the company and the employees. Okay.
Yes, and it's important to mention that in Brazil, the law is federal, right? Here in the US, we have the state laws that give us the guidelines. In Brazil, and the whole country are the same laws. So, Ron, you spoke a little bit about, the trends between Brazil and the US, but I would like you to go a little bit deeper about these trends in the US and Brazil markets, please.
So when I'm working with a U.S. client that wants to do business in Brazil, I work with them on having a written business plan for Brazil. And I ask a lot of questions because there's a lot of areas that they need to know about and be prepared for, because we have to come up with a realistic budget and a realistic time frame. And it's always costs more and takes longer than what most of the clients think it's going to take. And then we have to have a winning formula for success. It's very competitive, whether you're going to Brazil or coming to the US, of what's the competition? What's your selling advantage? How are you going to be successful? If you're importing a product to Brazil, it's already going to be tough because it's usually going to be 50 to 100% tax on it. So that's usually challenging. So if that's the case, then can we look at manufacturing in Brazil? You need to look at how you set up your corporate entity from the beginning. How does that relate to your U.S. company? Are you working through a holding company? If you're looking for investments, maybe you have an offshore U.S. holding company. And then you got to do your international tax planning to how those entities work together. That's like the beginning steps of where to start. You got to understand the tax structure. Sometimes in Brazil, when your product moves, you have to pay a tax every time your product moves. That's something different than the U.S. market. If you're working with a distributor and your distributor registers your mark, let's say if you're in the medical device or pharma industry, they could be the owner of your brand in Brazil. So sometimes maybe it's better to work through a third-party registration company, and then you find a distributor. Because Brazil is so big, like the U.S., it's not normal to find one distributor that's going to cover the whole country. You're going to find one for São Paulo, one for the South, one for the North. So what you're selling a strategy, other areas to think about, regulation. So I mentioned, Anvisa for anything pharma, biotech, but food supplements. FDA does not regulate food supplements in the U.S. like Anvisa does in Brazil. So you have to know that going into it. If it's agriculture, then MAPA is the regulatory body in Brazil. If it's electrical related in Metro, so you got to know about the regulatory, also local environmental regulatory for cities and states when you open your office. Where's your location going to be? I mean, you can open an office in Sao Paulo, but if you need to expand and have a warehouse, it's going to be very difficult to find a warehouse in Sao Paulo. So maybe Alphaville or somewhere outside of Sao Paulo. So there's opportunities all throughout Brazil, but your written business plan needs to have a category in each of these areas. And I have 20 or 30 questions that I ask every client to try to think about this before you go, because the last thing you want to hear is like, I wish I had known about that. That's not what you want to hear from your clients. So there's other areas, what's your marketing, advertising, social media strategy when you get there? Labor issues, how are you going to hire and make sure that you've got a budget for that and prepare payroll, accounting locally. These are just, it's like a business. Now, your business plan is going to change. You got to have some flexibility, of course, but whether it's politics, you got to have a campaign plan. Whether it's business, you got to have a business plan. But it's actually sitting down, writing this, and coming up with a realistic budget and timeline is what I try to get clients to do.
I would like to open for you all questions.
Thank you very much. So we have some relationship with inventors in Brazil. So does Brazilian government has incentives through grants as like we do here? That they can seek? Is it a ways and means they fund initially directions and needs of the country, such as anti-pollutions and as such? Right. Right.
FAPESP, which is the state government for Sao Paulo, is the key funder for innovation as far as biotech, ag tech, where it gives these pre-seed grants to these innovators and entrepreneurs that helps them get started. And
That's wonderful.
And there's also Bendis, which is helping companies with investments. That's like the next stage for investments. And then at that point, they're usually up and running enough where they can go out to angel investors or pre-seed money. So the Brazil government is very supportive of the innovation ecosystem in Brazil.
Excellent. Thank you.
I think the ambassador can add to that.
Yeah,
We're talking
just
money here.
just to complement, Ron mentioned FAPESP, which is the agency for technology of the state of São Paulo. Many states in Brazil also have their own agencies, and besides that, we have two big agencies, CNPq and FINEP, that finance investment in technology and everything. And above that, we have, as Ron mentions, the BNDES, which is the Development Bank of Brazil, which is a very, very big bank. We have more capital than the BID or whatever. So we have a very complex, but I would say a very interesting environment for developing technology in Brazil.
Excellent. We already have an IP on it. So Ron won. That's another reason why we need to have partnerships there. Right. It's another reason why we need to have more partnership there regards. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador.
Good morning, and thank you all. First, Consul General, congratulations, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to ask Ron a quick question, but can I first say this to the entire group? How many of you have ever, as you think about all the meetings that all of us have been to? I mean, it's a lot, right? How many meetings have you been to when the speaker system doesn't work? I've been to a lot of them. Thank you. I've heard every word that's been said today. Now, of course, I'm sitting right here and I am hearing impaired and I have my hearing aids on, but it's been crystal clear today. That's a huge, Antonio, that's a huge accomplishment to actually hear everyone that said anything this morning. Ron, I was fascinated with your comment about perhaps they get there and think that we're going to do it our way, and I find that in Georgia that even someone might come from California and think they're going to come to Georgia and do it that way, and so that it transcends kind of maybe wherever you're going. But I'm curious, do you see like Brazilians who might want to come here a greater recognition of that I've got to talk about the Super Bowl as opposed to when we go there, I'm still going to talk about the Super Bowl. What's that balance?
I think the challenges are very similar. I think it's about knowledge of the individual. So in Brazil, you have a lot of great entrepreneurs that visit the US on vacation but don't speak English. Really, I know many of them. And so they just don't understand or feel confident enough to go invest a ton of money in something that they can't talk. You have a younger generation that speaks a lot of English, and this is going to change as we go forward. But it's the same thing here. I mean, Italians have difficulty moving into the US because they don't speak English. So some big brands do, but it's not as widespread as you would think. The same thing for Americans in Brazil, right? Not a lot of Americans speak Portuguese. So how do you handle it, right? So that's why I always come back to this partner issue and finding someone that can handhold you through the process, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Minas Gerais, São Paulo, wherever it is, right? The biggest challenge that I see in doing the business, and I think you brought it up a lot about the details, is the value chain of products. So you can sell a widget in the US for $10, but that widget in Brazil is not $10. It might be 20. And you're not going to capture the market share that you're accustomed in the US at 10, in Brazil at 20. And so what happens is you're in the US and you say, well, I've got hockey stick growth, right? Just because I put it into the pipeline, it moves into Walmart, and I sell these enormous orders from Walmart or whatever. But you go in Brazil, and then you're saying, gee, I'm only getting 1/10 of 1%. Why is it I have a US business that can do so much, and in Brazil I do so little? Because you haven't adapted to the local reality. And that's the biggest issue. And then people get discouraged. They go, well, gee, we invested $5 million and we're only selling 500,000. In the US, we invest $5 million, we sell 50 million. And the challenge is understanding the reality. And sometimes they take too long to figure it out. And so they get discouraged. Their shareholders tell them, go invest in China, don't invest in Brazil. And then they got to get a way out. This happens every day.
It's a big challenge, country to country, or state to state. And there's some of the things I do right now is just dealing with 159 counties in the state of Georgia, trying to get something understanding. And that's
I mean, you look at some of the big guys. McDonald's is no longer in Brazil. They've licensed their business in Brazil. Nike is no longer in Brazil. It licenses its business. So they produce enormous amount of revenue with no cost, which shows up at the board meeting as a high level of profitability. But they do not invest in the country, which is a negative for the country, in my opinion. And Walmart has left Brazil. So you want to figure out ways that you can repeat success stories and not lose these opportunities just through licensing, which doesn't really bring a lot of investment, right? It produces profit for the shareholders, but not necessarily it's good for the country, right? And so the opposite is true also. Brazilians have great opportunities in the United States. Things like pão de queijo. The other day I was in the supermarket, there was this thing called Brazil Bites. Brazil or Brazilian bites. I don't know. Brazil bites. And they sell pão de queijo, and it's great pão de queijo. Costs $8 a little package. And I'm looking at it and go, these guys should be in the entire country. They're so good, right? But you don't see a lot of that in the US. You don't see a lot of that. And there's great opportunity. And the greatest success story is JBS. They taught the world how to do their business. That's the best practice, the best one out there right now. But Brazil needs more of that. And there's a lot of good business people in Brazil. A lot of good business people. I hope more come.
I guess it's my turn. You mentioned about finding local partners, right, to grow the business in Brazil. When I am Brazilian, and I want to explain the Brazilian mentality to Americans. I know it's not a very diplomatic, but I usually say that Brazilians are terrible at planning, but are awesome at improvising. Right, so we're good about finding out of the box solutions. But I guess if you think from a growth perspective, if you're relying on partners to grow, and you can't find the right partners for many reasons, your growth is always going to be capped. Right? So how do you sell Brazil to foreign investors? Right, when one of the constraints is additional infrastructure, language, taxes. Right, you need also rely on the right partners.
When I took Converse to Brazil, Converse was pirated by a local manufacturer that was making it illegal in Brazil. And there was a lawsuit that was unresolved for 10 years regarding the INPI registration. And even with that, I took the brand because I believed that there was potential. So we first went to the courts. We changed lawyers, got good lawyers, talked directly to the judges, and we got a reversal and the ownership of the brand. Then I went to the pirate, the manufacturer, and I said to him, it was during Star Wars, I said, would you like to come from the dark side to the bright side? And if you do, this is the upside you're going to have. And he did. And we supported him. They're very big today. But so it isn't, did he make a mistake making pirated product? Yeah. But he didn't know it different. Someone gave him the opportunity and he did it. But when given the opportunity to do it correctly and being able to make money, they jumped there. So I think that's important. Right? You have to, it doesn't happen, just nobody's going to show up and say, I want this. You got to sit with people and say, this is my plan. This is where we think we can go. Would you like to be part of this? And I think Brazilian business people are always looking for how they can get better, how they can expand. And so that's what I've used in the past, and it's worked for me. I've never found a partner that didn't want to get better. Never found it, but that's the key. They need to want to evolve,
One more question.
This is really a comment from a couple times ago on a question. So as you all can see, I'm Asian. I was born in Japan, educated there, and brought here. So I'm approaching 70 years old now. Okay, but it's just a few years ago, and I lived in the United States for quite a while, probably like 50 years. So you would figure that I'll know what the differences are by now, right? Until I ran into a book written by Malcolm Gladwell that led to another book called Cultural Consequences by Geert. There are 4 editions. It is a mandatory reading for all State Department personnel. It is a mandatory reading for all Department of Transportation investigators here in the United States. It explains accidents, negotiation skills, and so forth. But one that I wanted to mention, since I live in Georgia, is Americans are at the top of this area called Time and Distance Index. We believe, the Americans do, who've grown up here, that we have more control over distance and also in the future. And that attitude got me so in trouble, okay, here in the United States, because they're not used to getting that from a Japanese guy, right? We're so used to, from the Japanese side, hai, wakarimashita, right? And in the back end, they'll say, hey, I'll get you later, right? So time and distance index, and I highly recommend that. It is you can predict how they react when they're worried, emotional, invested. They fall to their common denominator of that cultural upbringing, and that area is called time and distance index. Once you read that, you can talk to anyone in the world and have a meaningful communication. Thank you.
Thank you. There is anyone? Sure.
The other thing somebody said about growth, my experience has been Brazil had a very high inflationary period. I mean, it was brutal, like Argentina now. And the Brazilian businessmen adapted. And they were able to adapt, which I think has set a culture in business. Brazilian businessmen are not known for long-term planning, like I think you mentioned. The reason, in my opinion, is because of what they had to go through to survive and the cost of money. And that's why they're so creative and so innovative when given the opportunity. That's been my experience.
I would like to open if anyone has questions for Rodrigo Fonseca from Apex. We didn't have time in the morning. We have one opportunity here to ask a question for him. Anybody? No? Any other questions for anyone? No? Okay, I would like to thank you, Ron. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you, Rodrigo, for all being here, for the consulate always, for the Brazilian Chamber of Commerce, from the World Trade Center. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope this brought, really good information about Brazil and also the cases we have shared here from Rodrigo and Gary, like succeeding in Brazil as well. So we need only to learn how to navigate and also to learn where we find good partners that we can rely on to succeed. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And I hope you had good connections. That's what we do, to connect people, right, as well in business. And if you have any questions, we'll be here. I wanted to take some pictures, so don't leave before we do that, right?
Thank you for all the work you've done.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you. So have a great day, everyone.